Okay. Right, it's now past, so I'll just do a quick introduction. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our final Wellbeing Talk of the year. Today is all around dealing with loss at Christmas and absence of loved ones. So we've got an amazing speaker today. So we've got Trevor. No pressure, Trevor.
Thanks.
An amazing speaker. So Trevor's been qualified for 20 years and has extensive experience working alongside adult and young people, survivors of sexual abuse and domestic abuse. So he specialises in mindfulness and now uses this in therapy with clients to see how the body reacts. So he works in private practice, is a counselling tutor and supervisor. So Trev has a strong emphasis on understanding the need for self-care. Today's session is going to be recorded, so that will come out, be edited and sent out shortly after. If we can just ask for everyone's cameras just to stay off, and please do use the chat facility for any questions. We should have about sort of 15 minutes at the end for them. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on them. And without further ado, away to you, Trev.
Thanks very much, Lucy. Brilliant. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to kind of just go through it as best I can this morning, talking a little bit about kind of grief and how to manage it. But what's most important, I think, as well, is it's not saying this is how you have to do it. Everybody is unique. Everybody is different. Everybody has our own different perspective on grief and how we manage it. So really, it's just my musings and my kind of experience of working with people who've lost a loved one over the years. I originally trained back in the 1990s with Cruse Bereavement Care and a guy called Dr. Colin Murray Parks, who I found quite incredible and inspirational around bereavement after having had a recent bereavement in the late 1980s. And I've progressed since then. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about grief. And as Lucy said, if you have any kind of questions, please put them in the chat box room and we'll kind of go from there. So as I said, this is not saying how to do it. It's just a few ideas of managing it. And firstly, it's okay not to be okay. I think very often around grief, there's a feeling that we should be okay and there's a time limit. And I'll talk about limits of time later on. So it's really important if we can, and it's okay to acknowledge our feelings. So the first step in coping with grief, particularly during the holiday, is to acknowledge our feelings and allow ourselves to feel the sadness, anger, the longing of losing somebody. Embracing our emotions is a crucial part of the healing process, and I'll talk about healing later on because a lot of people will say things like time heals, and I'll explain a little bit more how I've kind of managed that because I don't think it does as such. We just manage it differently. So it's not always easy to move. We try to suppress our feelings. We try to kind of keep them under control, whatever that means. So it's not always easy to manage them. And what they can do, they can come along and hit us at really unexpected times where we're just not expecting. Little reminders can often send us into a bit of a tailspin to a certain extent. And that's really important because it can come from absolutely nowhere at all. It may be something on the telly. It may be you pick up a piece of paper and someone's name's on it or something like that, or a photograph, or somebody mentions their name. So it's really important to be aware of that. Again, there's nothing wrong if we suddenly feel that big wave and wash of emotion that kind of comes over us. However, it is important that if we kind of imagine kind of standing on the edge of a beach and a big wave comes and hits us, it knocks us over sometimes. However, we know it will pass. It will be unpleasant. And it could be unpleasant for a bit of time, but it will pass. It will wash over us and it will leave us to a certain extent. So no matter how unpleasant it gets, we will come through it. And someone once kind of described managing a bereavement of a loved one to me. There's a book called Living on the Seabed. And in the book, and a friend, my colleague said to me, it's like you can't breathe. It's really difficult to breathe. And every now and again, you get to the surface, and you take a lovely big breath of fresh air, and you get there, and then some other wave, and usually I use an expletive before then, comes over and hits you and knocks you down again. However, over a period of time, we can learn to swim, to manage it a little bit differently, and we can come to the surface and take that breath of fresh air. It is hard though, without a shadow of a doubt. Just going to read a quote from the much maligned Sigmund Freud, whose daughter died. His eldest daughter died when she was 29. And although Freud gets a bit of a bad press at times, I think this is quite telling. And he said, although we know that after such a loss, the acute state of mourning will subside, we also know we shall remain inconsolable and will never find a substitute. No matter what may fill the gap, even if it is filled completely, it nevertheless remains something else. And actually, this is how it should be. It's the only way of perpetuating that love which we do not want to relinquish. Again, I think that's really quite poignant. And he wrote that, I think, about 9 years after the death of his eldest daughter. So many people have lost ones, maybe recently, maybe a number of years ago. And that's difficult. So particularly if you've lost someone through a traumatic incident, maybe, sometimes it can help if we are able to talk to somebody who may have gone through a similar sort of thing. It's not the same because everybody's thing is different, but they may be able to relate to it a little bit more and you may feel kind of less alone. So that's something to consider. So some of the kind of feelings that we may feel, particularly when losing someone, there's lots of kind of talk around stages of grief and phases of grief and bits and pieces, and I'll mention those in a moment. So anger, very often it's quite normal to feel anger at the person who's died, which is kind of a bit strange, really, to be quite honest, for leaving us, for how they've managed things or how we've managed things. So it might be angry with ourselves, whatever the situation is, angry with the person. It's also quite common sometimes for young people to be angry with the person that's died. And I'm thinking in particular of someone quite close to whose great-grandmother died earlier this year, and he was really angry that great-granny had died. He was sad of that, but also angry that because his grandparents and his mother were also upset. So why did Granny die? And they got upset as well. So quite normal for that sort of thing to happen. There's also kind of a feeling of guilt. Could I have done something differently? Could I have been there? Could I have spoken to him a little bit more? I wish I'd made that call. I wish I'd spoken. And again, that's a normal reaction to have. There's nothing wrong with that. It's very difficult, but it is important. And there may be some unanswered questions you might have. And you might be kind of repeatedly asking yourself these questions. Why did the person die? What could I have done? And very often conversations that can go round and round in our heads, and that's important, can be really frustrating. So sometimes I found it useful to put things into a bit of a journal, write a journal around it. If we can kind of take stuff, the brain wants to kind of put things into order, particularly at night, and put things into filing cabinets. And if we've got too much going on in our head, it's a bit like a washing machine. You put too much stuff in the washing machine, it doesn't clean the clothes. So if we have so much going on in our heads, it can't manage all that stuff. So sometimes writing a journal, putting it down, writing what your thoughts are, can be helpful. Of course, we need to be aware that other people might find what we've written down. So again, you kind of manage that as we go through. There's also a kind of a thing around kind of rejection. You might kind of feel rejected by the person who died, or for other people who just don't want to talk to you anymore. They don't mention the person's name, and that can be really painful as well. There's also a thing if someone has died by suicide as well, which adds to the kind of difficulties sometimes, and it can be feeling there's a bit of stigma there. People may be judgmental of the person who's died, and that's very often caused by a fear of misunderstanding. That can be painful for families and friends that are left behind. So lots of reasons. So what we try and do is, or what I try and kind of say is it's about managing bereavement and grief. It's not about getting over it or dealing with it or putting it away or dropping it or anything like that. And particularly over times like Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries, it can be really heightened. There's lots of things going on, lots of people saying, oh, I'm really excited about Christmas and whatever it is. And I worked with somebody earlier in the year whose sister had died over the Christmas period, and she just said, I can't do the little things. I can't do minutiae stuff. Not interested. And that kind of makes a lot of sense. And this year it'll be her first Christmas without her sister. So she's kind of aware of that. But when you have all that other stuff, everybody's supposed to be enjoying themselves. I think it's really, really hard. So whatever it is, just be aware of that. So it's important, if we can, to acknowledge supporting ourselves. So finding ways to remembering the person who's died, perhaps in happier times, a way of maintaining the bond with them, even after death, looking at pictures, meaningful places, or organising or gathering an activity in their name. Again, this might sound a bit strange, and lots of people don't want to talk about the person because they might upset somebody. My feeling is they are there, they're part of us, they always will be. And if we can, although it might be upsetting at the time, let's talk about them, let's bring them in. Let's, particularly over the kind of, as I say, Christmas, birthdays and anniversaries. So you might also want to kind of think about creating rituals at home, lasting memorial acts such as lighting a candle at a certain time each week, or maybe even someone said to me about kind of setting a place at the Christmas table with a photograph on them, or a candle in the window or something like that with a photograph. That's what people have said, and I quite like that idea. So when you're strong enough, you try kind of going back to activities and pastimes that you've kind of enjoyed, maybe with the person or just on your own. And what's really important at this time is to be able to look after yourself. Try to eat well, try to have some rest, even if sleeping is difficult. Spending out time outside is also good. Being with nature can really help. Taking those breaths of fresh air. Exercise, we all know these things, but sometimes just a walk can help. However, I think it's also important to be mindful, perhaps is the word I would use, to, if you're feeling that there's little point in life, watch out for risky behaviour. You might find yourself taking risks of your own health or safety. And if that's the case, then it's important that you talk to somebody if you feel like this. Maybe a friend, maybe somebody in the family, but maybe just a work colleague who is there to listen, not to give you advice, but to listen. Or you may need to take professional help through counselling or something like that. It could also be, I mean, Christmas in particular is a very tempting time for alcohol and various other recreational kind of activities. And it can be really kind of tempting to drink more because everybody's doing it, or take some drugs or whatever it is after a traumatic experience. And it may feel that they work briefly, but they won't take the pain away. They may kind of numb it for us, but they won't take the pain away. It will be there. So we just have to be kind of a little bit careful of that, I think. So how else can we support ourselves, particularly at Christmas? So maybe trying to planning in advance how you wish to celebrate. And you may not feel like celebrating Christmas at all, and that's okay. It really is okay. Or you might find even kind of sticking to certain things that you've always done at Christmas, Christmas traditions, is the best way to support you and your family, and maybe even to pay tribute to the person who's died. It's important to try and find what's right for you, and also not being pressurized into doing anything that you're uncomfortable with. We at home here, when we put the Christmas tree up, we don't do it straight away, but towards the Christmas day, we put kind of name tags, baubles onto the Christmas tree of all the people that are no longer with us. And I feel a bit emotional as I'm saying this now. We're going to be adding 2 more people to this tree this year. And it's really important for us as a family, and for me, to still have them with us in the house with us at that time. So if it feels significant, bring them into your Christmas if you can. Often, again, people will say things like kind of, can I speak to the person who's died? Find ways to remember the person, speak to the person silently or out loud. You can visit their grave, perhaps, or a place that was special to them. It's what's right for you. I think a lot of times people think they have to go and do this and they have to do that. It's what's right for you. There's no judgment on it. It's really important putting yourself and your feelings and your emotions to the fore. So you could do it on your own if you wanted to go to the grave or to a special place that was special to them. You may even just have photographs or memories that you can share to bring you together. And it is absolutely normal to talk to the person who's died. Have that conversation with them. Even be angry with them. It's okay. You may find yourself talking to them because your brain has temporarily forgotten that they've passed. Again, that's perfectly normal. And you may find, as I said, it quite comforting to speak out loud to them. There's nothing wrong with this. In many cases, it can even maintain the bond you had with them when they were alive. We can begin to build a new relationship with a person who's died. And I think that kind of sounds a bit strange, but it makes a lot of sense to me and some of the people I've worked with. It's almost as if I need to build a new relationship with them. It's not going to be the same. It can never be the same, but it's still just as important. It's really, really important. And we know that other people remember and mourn loved ones, friends, family in different ways. And sometimes it can be very difficult when they have different ideas within a family about how to grieve. And this can lead to arguments. So it's trying to be sensitive to others' needs and talk openly together about what will be best for you all. It's not thinking, I think, again, it's about communication, as I said earlier on. Really communicate what you need and to be able to listen without a judgment, without saying no, whatever it is, to what other people's needs are. It's trying to get that balance. So again, if we can, we try and keep a normal routine, although kind of when Christmas comes, it does kind of disrupt, or whatever the word is, the kind of the normal routine for everybody. And this can make it harder to look after yourself. So trying to keep to regular patterns of sleeping and eating, and where possible, this can make a difference. So if you can, see friends and family, maybe volunteering for the day. These are small little things that can help. And something that I kind of was thinking about earlier this morning is obviously COVID is still around, and if we have to isolate perhaps over the Christmas period because of COVID or whatever kind of needs, make sure you make time for movement and regular meals, and still trying to do that, looking after yourself if you can. And as I said earlier on about drinking, particularly over the festive period, it may feel that it will numb the pain, and also recreational drugs. But as I said, it only kind of provides temporary relief, really. That's all it does. Again, something that I think is something, again, I hadn't really thought about, but it makes a lot of sense, I think, is kind of taking a break from Christmas films and TV. There's so much on TV of Christmas films and how wonderful Christmas should be, and happy endings and all that sort of stuff. So it could be hard to and tough to be surrounded by happy images of families celebrating. So if it gets too much, consider taking a break from the TV and social media. Lots of times people will post stuff on social media, and all we see is other people posting stuff of them enjoying themselves. And if we're feeling pretty rubbish, that can just kind of add to our feelings. You can also, if possible, talk to someone. Tell them that you want them to listen, and perhaps acknowledge how tough it is for you, and that you don't want solutions from them. If we feel that we're actively listened to, without people saying, "Oh, you should do this, you should do that," it makes a huge difference. To be actually actively listened to in a non-judgmental way is massive, I think. So as you build a plan, consider 3 C's: choose, connect, and communicate. So you're allowed to choose what's best for you. Even when it's really dark and dingy and horrible, you still possess a dignity of choice. And grief often brings a sense of loss of control. So make choices about what you can attend and join and do, but also what you can't, to help resonate with some loss of control. It's okay to say no. It's all right. So basically, as well, we connect. We're wired for connection. That's part of us as humans. And grief intensifies feelings of loneliness, which often leads to isolation, and it's difficult to, but important not to remove yourself from others' lives. So although I said earlier on about choose, and you can choose not to attend stuff, we also part of the human race, and we're part of our makeup is connection. And also it's important to remember that no one wants to constantly hear how you're doing. And it's important not to be fake when you're asked, and that honesty will help, and will help others to help you. So if you're not doing well, you're having a rubbish day, it's a rubbish day. We don't have to kind of say it's okay. So again, the third C is communicate. Put your needs out there. Say to others, this is going to be awkward or weird, but this is what I need. Let people know how you plan to respond to others. How are you doing? The unfortunate thing and the difficulty around this is that it takes its vulnerability it requires for you to actually say those things. And a lot of us think we mustn't be vulnerable. We're not vulnerable. We've got to hide it. But actually, if we speak to people, we connect, choose, communicate, and connect with people, then hopefully they will listen to what we're saying. One thing that's really important, I think, around grief in particular is be patient with yourself, support yourself. People have often said they feel like they're going mad, things like that. It's not a sign of mental illness. It may take you some time to understand what has happened. So give yourself time. There is no time limit. Again, very often people kind of get a sense that, oh, I should be over it, whatever that means, within a short space of time. I don't agree with that at all. So perhaps maybe even writing a letter to the person who's died. Writing them a letter, kind of expressing, as I said earlier on, taking it out of the head, putting it on paper. And writing letters can often kind of help us organise your thoughts and put words down on how you've been feeling since the death. And when someone dies, so be kind to yourself. When someone dies, it is very, very stressful. So try to take kind of plenty of rest, making times for things. Something which I kind of quite enjoy talking about, or maybe suggesting to people I've worked with or other people, is maybe creating a memory box. Getting a box, I always say a shoe box, but it doesn't have to be. I don't know if you can get shoe boxes anymore. But decorate a box to put things in that remind you of the loved one. Maybe pictures, mementos, written journals, diaries, letters to them, anything. Keepsakes, lockets, I don't know, whatever you want to put in there. And then you can put the lid on and then return to it whenever you need to. It may be every day, it may be once a week, it may be 6 months, I don't know. But it's important. So I think creating a memory box can really help, and you can perhaps get other members of the family to maybe to do it, to draw on it on the outside, decorate it however you want to decorate it. The only kind of caveat to that is that I would suggest is that wherever you keep it, be aware that somebody else might find it and look at it. So if it's confidential stuff you've got in there, just be aware of that. You could put a little tag on the top, do not open unless with me, or whatever. Or tell people that I've got a memory box, I don't want anybody to look into it. But I think, again, it can be useful. It's quite emotional at times as well. So going back to kind of grief itself, one of they used to talk about stages of grief, and there would be kind of like 5 stages of grief. One would be denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I think they're all important. But what's even more important is they're not a linear line that you travel on. So you might have denial, anger, bargaining, whatever it is, depression, but very often they all get jumbled up together. So, and it's important to be aware of this. You don't go from anger to bargaining to depression to acceptance. They're not stages that you kind of find yourself through, obviously stages. So very often when we're going through bereavement times and bits and pieces, it can be kind of 2 steps forward, or 1 step back, or 3 steps back, or even 4 steps back. So that's kind of important. Another way of looking at things, different way of looking at grief in particular, is growing around grief. And it's a model that was created by Lois Tonkin, sorry. And she came up with a model after speaking to a client about the death of her child. And the lady said to Tonkin that at first the grief filled every part of her life. It was all consuming. And I got to be honest, I think I go along with that. It is absolutely everything. If you can imagine, it's just full of everything around the bereavement. And then this lady said to Tonkin, she said, I thought that at times, as time went by, the grief would shrink and become a much smaller part of her life. But that didn't happen. The grief stayed just as big, but her life grew around it. There were times when she felt the grief as intensely as when her first child had died. And there were other times when she felt she lived her life in the space outside that small circle. So I quite like the idea of growing around grief. I think it makes a lot of sense. So if you can imagine, view a stone, rock, whatever you want to call it, in a box. And when it's happened, when that bereavement has happened and we're going through it, it fills that box. You can't get anything else in there. The box is completely squeezing, it's pushing at the edges, it's everything. And we often think we'll never get over it. And again, I don't particularly like that expression, get over it. I think we learn to manage stuff. So it acknowledges that where there'll be some days when the grief is so strong, it's almost as if it's happened today. But over a period of time, the box gets bigger. We put other stuff into the box. It may be difficult at first, but actually this grief itself stays just as big, but the box gets bigger. We put other stuff in there. And at times that might feel that we're being disloyal to the person who's died, but growing around the grief model, using that, will allow us to grieve the loss of our loved one while carrying on with our own lives. So we put other stuff in, the box gets bigger, the grief is still there. And that's important. I think it allows us, as I said, to grow around it. Something that I can remember hearing in my own life, and people have said it loads of times to other people, I'm sure, often time heals. No, it doesn't. I don't think it does at all. And I'm reminded of a person I worked with years ago, and she spoke to me about the death of a loved one, and she was upset that people were saying, "Oh, don't worry, time will heal." And she likened the whole kind of bereavement experience for her was like a scar. It's a scar which we carry all the time, and sometimes we notice it, and it's so painful. It's there, and it is there, and other times we may not notice it as much. I always kind of think of a scar on my forearm to a certain extent and kind of cut and it's been stitched back together. It's there. And some days I don't even notice it. And other days it's really, really painful. And noticing when it comes up like that, that can be really quite surprisingly. But it's not about healing. We're not we're not being disloyal to the person. That scar, that loss of a loved one is always there. So I'm going to hopefully, if I can find it, read a poem to you very briefly, if I can find it, he hopes. Um, you just bear with me one moment. So this poem is called The Elephant in the Room. It was shared with me years and years ago, and I quite like it. I think it kind of says what it says. Um, there's an elephant in the room. It's large and squatting, so it's hard to get around it. It was squeezed by with, "How are you?" and "I'm fine," and 1,000 other forms of trivial chatter. We talk about the weather, we talk about work, we talk about everything else except the elephant in the room. There's an elephant in the room. We all know it's there. We are thinking about the elephant as we talk together. It's constantly on our minds. For you see, it is a very large elephant. It has hurt all of us. But we don't talk about the elephant in the room. Or please say his, her name. Oh, please say his or her name again. Oh, let's please talk about the elephant in the room. For if we talk about the elephant and we talk about her or him, perhaps we can talk about her or him's their life. Can I say their name? Can I say their name to you and not look away? For I cannot, then you are leaving me. Sorry, for if I cannot, then you are leaving me alone in a room with an elephant. As I said, I think that's quite poignant. Lucy, that's the end of my kind of musings as such. I don't know if you want to bring everybody back or what the situation is.
Oh, Trevor, thank you so much. That was so powerful. I've been welling up behind the screen here. Um, that was, yeah, I mean, the content and everything included. There's been so many amazing comments in the chat facility, which I will, yeah, we'll have a little look into them in a moment. I think my colleague Grace is just gonna share the screen. We've just got a barcode, so all our wellbeing talks are all free, but the charity, we can't do these without donations. So, however big or small, they're always welcomed. We're also doing a Christmas campaign this year where we've got a virtual tree. So each donation goes towards a light, a bauble, and it all goes towards us being able to carry on doing what we can do. Um, there's a few technical issues just around this popping the barcode on, but we'll pop it into the chat anyway. Right, Trevor. So a few questions for you.
Okay.
How would you respond to someone who compares to a death they've had to yours and the circumstances were completely different? So almost I've been there, I've got the t-shirt.
Yeah, that is quite difficult, but I think it's really important that we kind of acknowledge that everybody's grief is individual.
Hmm.
Um, and I think if someone is talking to us and saying, I don't know whether it's a bit of kind of my cat is blacker than your cat, I think that's a bit
Yeah.
difficult, unfortunately. Maybe it's the person who's saying that is kind of it's their need to speak out. Perhaps they've got something going on for them. But I think you have to kind of take a step back and go, okay, let them say what they need to say. But
Yeah.
my own grief, my bereavement kind of way I'm dealing with it is massively important for me, and it is important. Everyone does it differently.
Yeah, totally. I think that what you said about just actively listening, it is such a, it's, it feels like and sounds like it should be one of the most simple things that we can do as humans, but actually actively listening is so different, isn't it, for being with present someone and listening to them rather than saying, ugh. And I think there's sometimes good intentions around people saying, I've been there. I think they kind of that kind of, I guess, wanting to relate, would you say?
I think there's something around that. It's a bit like kind of when something if you've had a kind of bad journey home from work and
Mm,
it's really awful and you've been sat in traffic for hours on end and someone says, um, what do they say? Kind of, yeah, but you got here now.
yeah,
But if they say, and you got here, it kind of acknowledges what's gone
yeah,
on. It's that hearing it rather than just going, oh, yeah, but you got here now, let's move on. And I think,
yeah,
again, with bereavement, it's that active hearing what's being said from
yeah,
that person. And it is hard. Without a shadow of
yeah.
doubt, it's hard.
And language is so important around it as well. Um, so someone has said, Trevor, any strategies for long-term nightmares of the death as a close relative?
Well, that may be kind of a bit more kind of complicated grief if it's going for a long time and whatever. I think that's difficult. Nightmares are they're telling us something, they're bringing up something. It's kind of it's the unconscious talking about them. So maybe there's something that needs to be done during the day, some working through the death of a loved one and managing that. As I said earlier on, very much as kind of the brain wants to what's the right word, kind of put compartmentalize stuff, put things away in boxes or in files and things like that. And if it's not, then it becomes too complicated, it's too difficult. So very often, this is perhaps not about nightmares as such, but actually kind of getting to sleep, using techniques like going through the alphabet about people you know or places you've been, starting with A and working all the way through. And what that does, that allows the brain just to settle down and just think about one thing. I would
Mm,
suggest if they're a long term, maybe there might be a need to see a GP regarding sleeping or whatever it is. I'm not suggesting taking tablets or anything like that, because what GPs say, but it could be looking for what's going on, or even actually just thinking, writing down afterwards in the morning what the nightmare was about, what was going on.
mm,
It is very normal. And I'm going to disclose, I had the bereavements this year, and it is very normal to dream as if they're still alive, the loved ones are still alive, and it is so vivid, so vivid.
yeah.
You're not going mad. It's absolutely normal. It's telling us something, and maybe can we enjoy it to a certain extent? It's not a nightmare, but it may be a pleasant kind of dream, but we think it's a nightmare.
Yeah. I think something when I went through a really big bereavement, I think the beginning stages of when I was trying to acclimatize to my new normal, I would be really thrown in the day afterwards about that dream and feeling like they were going to walk in the room. But as the years have gone by, I can so resonate with that. I find almost a bit of a comfort, like they're kind of coming in and just saying hi, and it's another way of seeing their face in a different, which feels like a different world almost when you're dreaming.
I think so. And what can happen as well, again, this is my experience of it. You have a death of a loved one in the family, but it can bring up memories and thoughts and also dreams of other people who have died maybe a long time ago, because it
Mm,
kind of just brings it to the surface. Again, perfectly normal for that to happen. But it can be a bit, oh, I thought I'd kind of managed that. I thought I'd kind of, don't like the word get over it, but managing
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Where's that come from? Surely that's wrong. It's not wrong. It's totally normal.
yeah. I think it's yeah, and just normalizing these conversations because I think grief is something we all go through, but no one wants to talk about it, do they? No one wants to talk about it, and I think there is still so much stigma around grief and death as well.
Yeah.
So someone said if someone is worried about starting bereavement counselling, so what does a session look like? So the first session, second, I guess how long's a piece of string?
Well, it is a bit like that, but generally, bereavement counselling probably wouldn't start until, say, 3 months after the death, because
Okay.
you're still processing the whole kind of thing. So a lot of, if you go to some places like Cruise or other kind of bereavement services, I think even at kind of hospices, they'll kind of make initial contact, but they'll book you in for a session in, say, 3 months or 6 months' time.
Mhm.
You might think, well, hang on a minute, I should be over it by then, and it can bring back a lot of memories up front. But first session is all about building the relationship with the counsellor. It's not
Yeah,
going in and saying, right, we've got to fix this session one. It takes
yeah,
time. It takes you to build that relationship. And if you can feel comfortable with your counsellor, then you'll be able to work through your time with them. But it can be, as with counselling in itself, whether it's bereavement counselling, it can be really distressing at times. And you might kind of think,
mm,
why am I going here if I'm feeling worse when I come out?
yeah,
Perfectly normal. So
yeah,
the first session is kind of generally around just kind of getting to know the person, getting to know the client that's come through the door. And certainly something that I've used is, as we've progressed during sessions, we've actually kind of brought the person who died into the room, maybe brought a photograph in,
wow.
and had them present with us. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's emotional. It's hard. It's hard for the counsellor, hard for the client. But again, they are part of the process. They
Mm,
are part of it. So why not? It's not something that everybody would want to do, but it may
mm,
be. But it's also allowing you to have that confidential space to say whatever. You might
yeah,
not you might not be able to say to family and friends that you're angry with the person who's died.
yeah,
You might not be able to do that, but you can say it in the therapy room because it's
yeah,
confidential and it's supportive.
yeah. I think as well, I really resonated with continuing that bond when you said as well, continuing that bond. And it's something that until I'd experienced that grief, I couldn't really wrap my head around. But actually, there is that love is still there for them, isn't it? That love is still there. And
And
yeah,
absolutely.
and knowing what to, I think knowing where to go with that and where to put that love and actually continuing that bond keeps that love alive almost.
I couldn't agree more. You
Mm,
know, our love isn't any different.
yeah,
Well, as such, the circumstances are different, but we can
yeah,
still love somebody who's died without a shadow of a
yeah.
doubt. We can.
Absolutely. There's been quite a theme here as well, Trev, around furry friends and losing pets, and it's been a really, really, really big one. So we've got someone here who um this year I've joined the call. We lost our dog earlier this year, and it's devastating. I mean, they are family as well, aren't they? They're
Uh,
still,
They are just as important as humans. They
yeah,
really are. Particularly, I think particularly dogs in particular. They look up to us. We talk to them. They listen. They're there for us. And it is really important that we kind of
yeah,
carry on that kind of bond with the dog. It is really tough. And a lot of other people go, well, it's only a dog. I can remember being around somebody whose kind of pet rabbit had died, and I thought, pet rabbit? What's going on here? This rabbit. But
yeah,
when you hear the story that the pet rabbit had been around for the girls all their life, they brought up it was a family pet. They played with it.
yeah,
They'd been with it. Why wouldn't that have the
yeah,
same feelings, exactly the same feelings
yeah.
as we lose kind of animals? They're really really important, and for some people, they may be their only kind of
Mm,
support they've got away from other family members. So yeah, please, it's absolutely vital to a certain extent that people can grieve in a similar sort of way.
yeah. Would you say there is a uh not a time frame, but if someone feels like they haven't actually processed their grief or their grief hasn't kind of arisen yet and it's been years, would you say that's normal?
It can be normal, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just thinking of my family at the moment. We had some bereavements, as you know, Lucy, earlier in the year,
Mm,
and some people have kind of outwardly shown their grief and been quite angry with other people, and other
mm,
people have just kind of held everything in. And when does that come out? So I don't know. And as a therapist, it's not for me to say, well, it's going to come out in 6 months. But yeah,
yeah.
it can, it may be the circumstances. So holding on to it, that's okay as well. It's not a bad thing. If it becomes complicated, then it could be, and you perhaps need to kind of look for some sort of kind of therapeutic support to allow it to do it in that kind of confidential space.
Yeah.
But again, it may be a way of I need to kind of I can't think of the word not believe it. I don't want to believe it. I've got no acceptance of it, so I won't manage it as such.
Yeah.
And it's there. So
Mm.
I don't think generally there's a time with it. I really don't.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's just maybe acknowledging that as well, because is it something maybe around the complete denial of it? That's all really, really telling. Like, nope, nope, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that may be the way that you manage it. And if you want
Mm,
to, if and something sometimes to take that away from somebody can be really difficult. So
yeah,
you wouldn't want to just go, right, okay, I'm going to process it now.
yeah,
You build up to it, get that kind of, you know, I'm not strength isn't the right word, but get that kind of confidence that yeah, it's okay to deal with it, even if it was
yeah,
5, 10 years ago. It's not a problem.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. We've got a question saying, how can we support someone who is grieving that we're not necessarily close with?
I would actively speak to them, ask them what
Yeah,
they want.
yeah,
Go and ask them what they need, what they want, not looking for solutions to give them solutions, because then are you giving a solution for your own sake, for yourself, really?
yeah.
But go there, speak to them, allow them to say whatever they do. Very often, kind of think people have said to me, "Oh, I lost whoever it was," and then nobody will mention their name. No one will talk about them. And some
Mm,
people have said that other people have seen me and they don't want to talk about it, so they walk across the other side of the road, which is
yeah,
just awful.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, I don't know I don't know what to say, so I won't. I'll walk the other way. I won't see it.
yeah.
People do. People are observant of when people walk
Yeah,
across the way and don't mention the name and things like that. So actually, maybe go across, maybe speak to them and say, "What do you need from me?"
yeah,
If you just want a listening ear, that's brilliant. And I think if somebody wants to do that, yeah, good on them. But
yeah,
take the lead from the person.
absolutely. And I think something from my personal experience, I was living in quite a small place before I moved to London, and I would see people and they would often walk across the side of the road when they saw me.
Mm.
Um, and when you're grieving, I think you don't know, sometimes you don't know what it is that you need. And it's okay just and you need someone just to say, what can I do? I think that simple sense of what can I do for you?
Yeah,
Um, the power in that is really, really important.
Yeah.
Somebody said, I think it's difficult if you haven't experienced bereavement on how to deal with someone who has lost someone. Yeah.
It is, and very often when kind of teaching kind of young counsellors in particular, and they talk about kind of bereavement, well, how do I deal with it? I've not had that experience. And
Mm,
yeah, it is difficult. But again, as I said, everybody's kind of bereavement's different and unique.
yeah.
That open listening, as I keep saying, that just be there for the person, ask them what they need.
Yeah.
You don't have to have experienced everything. Having said that, though, if we look at loss, we've all gone through loss somewhere. It doesn't have to be a bereavement. It could be loss of a job, loss of a boyfriend, girlfriend, or something like that.
Yeah.
Loss of something, something kind of what we think is insignificant, but actually it's had an impact on us. So we all have an experience of some sort of loss of a friend moving away or something. I don't know, but we will have
Yeah.
all gone through some sort of loss somewhere. So maybe we can tap into some of those kind of feelings. Okay, it's not going to be the same. Appreciate that as a bereavement.
Yeah.
We will have those skills.
And it is that there is that real, it's a really similar feeling, isn't it? That loss and grief, they are so closely linked. I mean, loss of a loved one, it is can be one of the most painful things to go through, but that feeling of not knowing what to do with yourself, and in that, where what do I do with this emotion that's sitting so unbelievably heavy with me? Yeah, and the just loss of a job, all sorts.
Well, as I said earlier on, that kind of living on the seabed, and then you come up to the surface and take a fresh breath of fresh air, and then another wave comes
Mm.
along and knocks you down. That's pretty rubbish, that is, without a shadow of a
Yeah,
doubt.
that was a really beautiful way of wording it, and I'd never thought of it like that either. Jeff, I actually, when I went for a bereavement, I got told, because I remember speaking to someone saying, me and all my siblings are grieving so differently, and that was really hard in itself. One of us, one day we were feeling really angry, the other one was really upset,
Yeah, yeah,
and I had someone said to me, Lucy, it's almost like a car accident. You've had someone that's passed away, someone that is come out with a broken back, someone that's come out with a broken arm, and someone that hasn't. And I was like, that's really interesting. It being in that car, almost being with your family and all feeling
yeah.
things different.
We've all had it's a kind of like a shared experience, but it is all different.
Yeah, definitely. We've got another one here. Do you have any recommendations on books, podcasts, things around grief and loss? So anything that, any materials that are really quite hitting? The
Um,
poem was beautiful.
Off the top of my head, no, but I can find something and send them to you, so maybe you can put that into
Yeah,
whatever you put out. There are a number of books out there. And if I turn around and look at my shelf, probably got a few on there, but I don't want to do that
yeah,
because I'll spend time looking for them. But there are books, I think it's important to say, um, particularly when I spoke about kind of the stages of grief with Colin Murray Parks and a lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote a book called On Death and Dying and talked about the stages of grief. It makes sense to me, but I know other people just no, we can't have any of the stages of grief. But it all gets
yeah.
jumbled up. So
Okay.
there are books. I'll try and find some and send them to you, Lucy, and you can perhaps put it on the information.
Yeah, it was so interesting because I've had various conversations around this as well, Trevor, the stages and
Yeah,
how um but I got, when I remember getting given a bit of paper, and I think I've spoke to you about this before. I got given a bit of paper when I lost my brother, and it was like, you were going to go through this and this, and I instantly, my prickles went up because I thought, how in the world are you going to know exactly what I'm going to go through? But actually, I had some bereavement counselling, and she said, at some stage you may go through these things, and these are
absolutely.
those main emotions. So I was like, okay, I can resonate with that. But
Mm.
when I first got that thinking, well, hold on a second, I've jumped straight down to this one. I can't even imagine that this is going to come
I think
come
giving clients some information about how you might feel and that it's um, not what's the right word? It's not a linear line you go from one to the other.
yeah,
It's almost like first aid saying yes, it's quite normal to feel like this.
yeah,
Something I wanted to just mention, if I can, it just come into my head.
yeah,
Young people, children in particular, grieve completely different to adults. People may be aware of this or not. Kind of very often you get young kids who are really upset that granny's died or whatever, or somebody's died, and they're really in it and they're crying and they're very upset. The next minute they're saying, "What's on TV? What can I have for dinner?
Yeah.
What we're eating?" And it's almost as if it's never happened. And the way to kind of explain that is that the kids kind of tend to puddle jump. If you can imagine puddles, they jump from puddle to puddle, but actually sometimes they're out of the puddle. Where with with adults, we tend
Yeah.
to stay in the puddle. We're not able to move out of that puddle, in that grief puddle, but kids do. So there's nothing wrong with the young person. It's not about saying they're over it.
Yeah.
It's just how their brains work, how their young minds work. And it's quite normal. So
That's
puddle
so
jumping for young
interesting.
people, but adults, we tend not to. We tend to stay in that kind of puddle a lot longer.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I never knew that. Trevor, I think that's really, really good to know. Um, I was speaking to someone and they said that they were having a similar experience with that, and that was quite challenging because again they were grieving quite differently and not kind of understanding that. So knowing
Yeah,
that, yeah,
and just as a kind of a bit of added on to that, it's really important for how we kind of the language we use around to tell kids that people have died.
okay. What would
Somebody
you
recently,
recommend?
somebody recently said, well, I think it was Granny again that died. Well, can't we plug her in like my phone dies and I plug her in and get her going again? Which it sounds a bit kind of, it is childish and it's childlike rather, but you can understand why a young person might think like that.
Yeah,
And then, oh, they died of a stroke. Well, I stroked the cat. Is the cat going to die?
okay, yeah,
Or even heart attack. Oh, they've been attacked. So I think language is really important around children. And
yeah.
we try to kind of say things that make us feel better to a certain extent. But I think for me personally, and not everyone's the same, and people have religious views and various other bits and pieces, it's being honest with the person, with the young
Yeah,
person in particular.
yeah,
Honesty is really finding the age appropriate words. There are books. There's a book called Somebody Important to Me Has Just Died. I think I'll find the details for you, and
yeah.
people can read that. But lots of hospices have information on that sort of stuff as well.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, and again, that importance around language, and yeah, and that's going to stay with me. The what the children said. That's so yeah. Um. Okay, I think we've pretty much got through all, and there's some really beautiful reflections on there, Trevor, and loads of people just thanking you, and people coming forwards and sharing their experiences with grief and speaking to someone. So Trevor, the biggest thank you to you.
No worries. No worries.
It's been amazing. It's I mean, from the chat you can have a read through all the comments and everything that everyone's shared, and yeah, just a huge thank you. It's so informative and I've taken so much from it. And being really honest, I thought going through grief, I'm like, I kind of feel like I kind of know my way around, but yeah, you've taught me loads. So a huge, huge thank you. I just wanted to, yeah, wish everyone a restful break. And if you do need any support, we are here at the EIC. So please, please do come through to our helpline or support email if you want to discuss anything or look in support for anyone. We've also got a feedback form. So if you could leave some feedback on Trev's amazing webinar, that would be excellent. So yeah, huge thanks again, Trev.
No worries. Take care. We'll
Lovely.
speak soon.
Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
so
Bye.
much. Bye bye.
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 Bye bye.
Thank you.